There is a moment in season 19 of The Simpsons where Homer Simpson stands over his dying mother and cannot say the thing he needs to say. He had the words ready. He had made a card. He went to find her and she was already gone. 30 years of food and beer and noise and distraction, all of it was Homer trying to manage a hole that opened in him when he was a child and that he never once found a word for. Sigmund Freud spent his entire career writing about men exactly like Homer Simpson: the absent mother, the damaging father, the hunger that food cannot touch, the love that is real and still not the right shape, the damage that passes from one generation to the next without anyone choosing to pass it. This is not a video about a cartoon dad who likes donuts. This is a video about what The Simpsons built underneath the jokes, a complete psychological portrait that Freud would have recognized immediately. Welcome to Yellowfan. Let's get into it. The Hole That Never Closed. Season 7 of The Simpsons is where the show stopped being a comedy about a dumb dad and became something harder to name. The jokes were still there. Homer was still falling down stairs and eating donuts with the kind of focus most people reserve for delicate surgery. But something underneath the show had shifted, a willingness to let the comedy go quiet long enough to look at what was actually driving these people, to sit with an uncomfortable truth and not cut away from it before it could land. The shift happened most completely in a single episode. It aired November 19th, 1995. Richard Appel wrote it and David Silverman directed it, and when it was finished, it had done something no episode before it had managed. It explained Homer Simpson. Not the jokes, the person the jokes were hiding. The episode was called Mother Simpson. Glenn Close voiced Mona Simpson, Homer's long-lost mother, and she did it in a way that made you forget she was acting. The opening of the episode gives no sign of what is coming. Homer fakes his own death to avoid cleaning a highway for Mr. Burns. A prank, completely classic. Nothing in the first 5 minutes suggests the next 20 are going to be some of the most emotionally precise television the show ever made. But then Homer falls into an open grave, one that had been dug for him as part of his death hoax, and a woman appears at the edge of the hole and scolds him for disrespecting her son's burial plot. Homer recognizes the voice. He has not heard it since he was a very small child. He has spent his entire life believing the woman it belongs to was dead, his mother, standing over a grave, looking down at him. What the show had never done before this moment, not properly, not completely, was explain why Homer is the way he is. Why the food, why the beer, why the noise and the jokes and the constant, restless inability to sit still with anything that might hurt him. For 6 full seasons, Homer had been a man shaped by forces the show had never bothered to name. Mother Simpson names them. When Mona was a young woman, she had joined a group of activists protesting a germ warfare laboratory owned by Mr. Burns. The group detonated what they called an antibiotic bomb inside the lab in 1969. Mona stopped to help Burns after he was trampled in the chaos. He recognized her. She had to run. She could not come home, not safely, not without putting Homer and Abe in danger, and so she went into hiding. She kissed a sleeping young Homer goodbye and walked out the door before he woke up. He never saw her go. He just woke up one day and she was not there, and she never came back. Abe told Homer she was dead. He thought it was kinder. He was wrong about that, but he thought it. A child understanding that death had taken someone could build themselves around that. A child understanding that the person had chosen to leave, or had been forced to leave by circumstances bigger than the family, that was a different kind of wound, and Abe did not think Homer was built to carry it, so he lied. And Homer grew up believing his mother had died, and built his entire sense of himself around that version of the story. The episode reveals this slowly and then all at once. The family confronts Mona. She tells them everything. The room goes quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something that has been hidden for a long time finally comes out into the air. Homer, for the first time, understands what? actually happened in his childhood. His mother did not die. She was forced to vanish, and she has been surviving out in the world this whole time while he was growing up without her. The scene that carries all of this, the one the show had been building toward without anyone knowing it, is not the reunion. Everyone talks about the reunion. The image that actually holds the weight of the whole episode is the one at the very end. Homer gets an anonymous tip that the FBI is moving on the house. He helps Mona escape before they can arrest her. She gets into a van. She says goodbye. She tells him he will always be a part of her life. The van drives away. For the second time in Homer's life, his mother leaves without him being able to stop it. Homer goes outside. He sits on the hood of his car. He looks up at the stars. The show does not put music under this moment immediately. It holds the silence first. Homer does not cry. He does not speak. He just sits there with the specific stillness of someone absorbing something they do not know how to carry. The stars are still there after she is gone. That is all the episode offers him. David Silverman confirmed in production notes that the stargazing ending was decided at the table read. The director felt the scene was so complete that no further dialogue was possible after it. He was right. The image does something words cannot. Homer watching the sky is not a man looking for comfort. He knows there is none up there. He is just looking somewhere other than at the empty road she drove away on. Homer sitting on that car is also, without anyone saying it, every moment of his adult life seen from a new angle. Every donut, every beer, every time he reached for something to fill a space that language had never given him a way to describe. The show had been setting up this image for 6 years, and it did not need to explain it. The silence explained it. The stars explained it. The empty road explained it. When Mona returns in season 19, episode 19, Mona Leaves-a, which aired May 11th, 2008, and was Glenn Close's final appearance as the character, Homer refuses to let her back in. He is angry. He pouts through her entire visit and rejects every attempt she makes at closeness. He is not cruel in a calculated way. He is cruel in the way people are cruel when they are frightened of being hurt again by the same thing that already hurt them once. He knows on some level that she will leave, so he leaves first, emotionally, before she can. In this episode, Homer confronts Mona directly about what her absence cost him. He tells her she left a hole in his heart that he filled with food. In Mother Simpson, Moe had said the same thing about alcohol, that Mona left a hole in Homer's heart that Homer filled with drinking. Two separate characters, 13 years apart in the show's production, pointing at the same thing from two different directions. The writers came back to this connection not once, but twice, because the connection was not decorative. The hole was not a metaphor. The food and the beer were not personality quirks. They were Homer's solution to a problem he had been living with since he was a child. Freud spent years writing about what happens in the very first months of a child's life when the person who is supposed to be there, the one who feeds and holds and soothes, is absent. Not just physically absent, but emotionally unavailable. Not just once, but consistently. What happens, Freud argued, is that the child develops a hunger that food can never fully address. The mouth becomes the site of an unsatisfied need that was originally about comfort and connection and warmth, and that hunger travels with the person into adulthood in the form of compulsive eating, compulsive drinking, and a persistent low-level restlessness. The sense that something is missing, that the next meal or the next drink will finally take care of it, and the quiet, bewildering disappointment when it does not. Homer's mother left when he was a child. The donut is the part of him that never stopped looking for her. This is not a reading applied to the show from outside. The show built it in. The writers confirmed the connection in the episode itself, through Moe's line and through Homer's confrontation with Mona in Mona Leaves-a. The oral hunger, the reaching, the eating, the drinking, the mouth as the first and most reliable tool for managing discomfort runs through every season of the show because it was the show's explanation for who Homer is at the base. before the jokes, before the strangling and the homering and the dole, before any of it. A child in a house without his mother, eating to fill the space she left. The stargazing image has been called one of the saddest scenes in the show's history, including by the Simpsons wiki and by the critical writing that followed the episode's broadcast. What makes it sad is not just the loneliness of the image. What makes it sad is that the audience, by season 7, already knew every single thing Homer had done to manage this moment. All the food, all the beer, all the noise, and recognized, watching him sit there in the quiet, that none of it had worked. He was exactly as alone as he had been the morning he woke up and she was gone. The eating had filled nothing. The drinking had filled nothing. He was sitting on the hood of his car looking at the sky, and the sky was not looking back. 6 seasons of Homer Simpson have a different weight after this episode. Not different comedy. The jokes are still the jokes. But underneath them, running the whole time, there had been this. A child who woke up one day and the most important person was not there anymore, and who built his whole adult self around carrying that without ever quite naming it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The absent mother explains the hunger, but the hole she left did not sit empty on its own. Something moved in to fill the space. Not food, not Duff, but another person, the other parent, the one who stayed. And what Abe Simpson did with the years he had his son sitting right there in front of him is a wound of an entirely different shape, one that would follow Homer into every room he ever entered as a father himself. Section 2. The Man Who Raised Him. There is a scene in Season 6, Episode 10 of The Simpsons that most people remember as a fight. Homer and Abe Simpson are in a car together, arguing, and the argument gets bad enough that Abe says something that stops the whole episode cold. He tells Homer that his birth was an accident, that Homer was never supposed to exist, that he never should have been born. Homer pulls the car over. He tells his father to get out. Abe gets out. Homer drives away. The episode is called Grandpa vs. Sexual Inadequacy, and it aired December 4th, 1994. Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein wrote it. Wes Archer directed it. The plot, on the surface, is about Homer and Marge's fading intimacy and Abe's miracle tonic that fixes it, the road trip selling the tonic to other couples. The comedy of a father and son driving around together, discovering they have almost nothing in common, and most of what they do have is painful. The episode was included in a 1999 video collection called The Simpsons: Too Hot for TV, and the complete 6-season DVD, released August 16, 2005, contains commentary where Oakley confirms the episode was designed to make explicit what had only been implied before, that Abe's failures as a father were directly responsible for Homer's failures as a father, not as background detail, as the main point. The car scene is the clearest version of it, but the episode is full of smaller ones. There is a flashback to Homer as a boy watching President Kennedy on television and imitating him the way children do, the way children try on the people they admire to see if the shape fits. Abe watches this and rolls up a newspaper. He tells Homer that America was made so idiots like Homer could not grow up to be president. He tells him to stop daydreaming. The newspaper is not a weapon here. It is something almost worse. A father using the full weight of his authority to make his son feel small, and doing it casually, the way you do things you do not even realize require justification. That moment in the flashback is doing quiet, devastating work. Mona is there too, in the same memory. She says maybe their Homer could grow up to be president one day. She says it with warmth and belief, the specific brightness of a mother who sees something worth encouraging. Abe shuts it down immediately, and then Mona was gone. The circumstances of her departure covered in section 1, and what was left was Abe, the rolled newspaper, the casual dismissal, the boy who had been told to stop dreaming, alone with the man who told him. The TV Tropes documentation of the episode notes something that most casual viewers miss on first watch. Abe strangles Homer during the car argument. He grabs him the way Homer grabs Bart throughout the entire series. He uses the same motion, the same impulse, the same barely controlled physical burst of frustration. The show puts this in the episode and does not comment on it. It does not need to. Anyone who has watched 6 seasons of Homer wrapping his hands around Bart's neck and saying, "Why, you little," knows exactly what they are looking at when Abe does the same thing to Homer. The chain is not an accident. Oakley's DVD commentary confirms this directly. It states that the episode makes explicit what the show had been implying, which is that Abe's behavior shaped Homer's behavior as a father. Homer strangles Bart because Abe strangled Homer. Homer dismisses and underestimates and periodically forgets to show up because that is the entire parenting vocabulary he was given. He is not a bad father in the way that someone who does not care about their children is a bad father. He is a bad father in the way that someone who was never shown what a good father looks like is a bad father. The difference matters enormously, and the show understands it. Homer's line in this episode is the one that holds everything together. He says, "How am I supposed to be a good dad when I never had one myself?" He says it plainly, without drama, the way people say things they have been sitting with for a long time. The show does not put a revelation score under it. It does not cut to Abe having a moment of realization. Homer just says it, and it sits in the air of the episode like a fact. The season 28 episode, A Father's Watch, would later confirm that the chain of damage in the Simpson family does not even start with Abe. It goes back further, through generations of fathers passing the same failures down to their sons without understanding that what they were passing was damage at all. Abe was not the origin. He was just the version Homer had to live with. What makes all of this a Freudian case study rather than just a sad family story is the precision with which Homer repeats the pattern he inherited. Freud identified what he called the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate the emotional conditions of formative experiences, even when those conditions were painful, even when the person doing the recreating would say they desperately want something different. The repetition is not deliberate. The person doing it often cannot see it at all. They are not choosing to hurt their children the way they were hurt. They are drawing from the only blueprint they were ever given, and the blueprint was built from damage. Homer tells Lisa she is stupid when she takes an interest in things he does not understand. Homer tells Bart he does not want him. Marge, in the Grandpa versus Sexual Inadequacy episode, confronts Homer about this directly. She says Homer tells Bart he did not want him all the time, and Homer's defense is that it is cute when he does it. He genuinely cannot see what he is doing. The words that broke him as a boy, Abe in the car, telling him his birth was an accident, have become words Homer uses so casually with his own son that he has reframed them as affection. The mechanism Freud described is running exactly as described. The wound becomes the weapon, and the person wielding it does not know they are armed. There is a particular image from the grandpa versus sexual inadequacy episode that lands harder the more you think about it. At the end of the episode, after the fight, after the car, after Homer kicks Abe out and drives away, there is a reconciliation. The two of them end up rolling around on the grass together, trying to put out a fire on their clothes. It is played entirely for comedy. They are laughing. They hug. The argument and its contents dissolve into the silliness of the situation, the way arguments in this family always eventually dissolve. But the things Abe said do not dissolve. Your birth was an accident. You never should have been born. The hug at the end cannot reach back through the episode and unmake those words. The show lets the comedy land and then leaves those sentences sitting right where Abe put them, and the audience carries them into every subsequent Homer and Abe scene. Every time Abe embarrasses Homer in public, every time Homer dumps Abe at the retirement home without a second thought, every time Homer treats his father as an inconvenience. The grandpa versus sexual inadequacy episode is what explains all of it. Not excuses it, explains it. Homer cannot love Abe properly because Abe never gave Homer a working example of what proper love from a father looks like. The retirement home is worth pausing on. Homer's relationship with Abe's nursing home, the way he drops his father there and leaves, the way he forgets to visit, the way Abe's misery at the home registers as background detail, rather than something Homer feels urgency about fixing, reads completely differently after this episode. Homer is not heartless about his father. He is doing to Abe exactly what Abe's emotional absence did to him. The retired man sitting alone in the home is the same emotional experience as the boy who woke up one day and his mother was gone, and then found that his father, who stayed, was somehow still not fully present. Abe was physically in the house. He was not the kind of present that counts. The show does something careful with Homer's attempts to be different. He is conscious of the problem in a way Abe never appears to be. He says it out loud in this episode, the admission about not knowing how to be a good father. He makes visible efforts across the series to give his children things Abe never gave him. He shows up to Lisa's recitals when he would rather be anywhere else. He goes to dangerous lengths to help Bart when Bart needs him. He loves his children with a loudness and a physicality that Abe's generation of fathers did not permit themselves. But the strangulation keeps happening. The dismissals keep happening. The moments where Homer's unprocessed damage rises up and finds his children before he can stop it keep happening, because awareness of the pattern is not the same as being free of it. Homer knows he is repeating something he should not be repeating. Knowing does not stop him. The pattern runs too deep and too early and too automatically to be interrupted just by wanting to interrupt it. Freud's argument was that insight alone is not enough. Understanding where the damage came from does not undo the damage. The person has to do more than name the wound. They have to actually go into it and work through it, which is a different and much harder thing. Homer never does this. He cannot. He is a cartoon character running on a floating timeline where character development is only permitted to go so far before the show has to reset. But within the logic of that constraint, the show is remarkably honest about what the lack of that work costs. The strangulation does not stop. The Bart did not want him jokes do not stop. The visits to the retirement home stay perfunctory. Lisa, who has her grandmother Mona's intelligence and social conscience, grows up knowing her father loves her, and also knowing that love has a ceiling she cannot get past. a point at which Homer's emotional equipment simply runs out, and she is left on the other side of it. Bart, who has been told repeatedly and apparently humorously that he was not wanted, builds an entire personality around not needing to be wanted. His chaos and his rebellion and his relentless testing of every limit is the behavior of a child who has concluded, somewhere below the level of words, that love is conditional and the conditions keep changing, so he might as well be ungovernable. The episode where this transmission is most plainly visible is not Grandpa versus sexual inadequacy, but the one it makes possible. Everything the show would later do with Homer and Bart, every scene where the strangulation happens, every moment where Homer's disappointment in his son flickers through before the love reasserts itself, every time Bart acts out and Homer cannot understand why, those scenes have this episode running underneath them. Abe in the car. Your birth was an accident. The boy sitting with that, alone, becoming the man who would one day say equivalent things to his own son and call it a joke. The pattern is clean and devastating. Mona disappeared and left hunger. Abe stayed and left a different kind of emptiness, the kind that comes from being present in the body while absent in everything that actually matters. Between the two of them, they handed Homer a set of emotional tools that were missing several essential pieces, and Homer went out into the world with those tools and built the best family he could manage. The family he built is real. The love in it is genuine. The show does not argue otherwise. But running alongside the love, in every direction, is the damage, the oral hunger from the absent mother, and the repetition of Abe's failures playing out one generation lower. Homer sitting on the hood of his car in Mother Simpson, and Homer being told he was an accident in this episode, are the same portrait from two different angles. A man who was not held correctly when it mattered most, trying to hold other people correctly, and not always managing it. The food and the beer address the first wound. The strangulations and the dismissals carry the second one forward. And all of it, the hunger, the noise, the reaching, the repeating, is Homer running on the only psychological equipment he was ever given. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What the show had not yet shown at this point in its run was what happens when someone meets Homer the way Frank Grimes did, head on, refusing to absorb him or accommodate him, treating the chaos not as lovable, but as genuinely dangerous. That collision, and what it revealed about which version of Homer the world was actually dealing with, is where things get darker. Section 3. The Man Who Couldn't Survive Homer. Season 8, Episode 23 of The Simpsons aired May 4th, 1997. John Swartzwelder wrote it. Jim Reardon directed it. The episode is called Homer's Enemy, and it is the darkest 30 minutes the show ever produced. Not because anything graphically terrible happens in it, but because the thing it is actually saying about Homer Simpson and about the world Homer Simpson moves through lands somewhere most comedies refuse to go. The episode begins with a man named Frank Grimes. Hank Azaria voiced him. The character was, unusually for the show, designed to resemble a specific real person. The animators and Jim Reardon modeled Grimes partly on Michael Douglas's character in the 1993 film Falling Down, a man pushed to break down by a world that rewards the wrong things. Reardon's college roommate was also an influence on the character's look. The design process alone, confirmed in the episode's production notes on Wikipedia, tells you the show was not building a throwaway antagonist. They were building a specific type of person, someone the audience would recognize as real in a way the other Springfield residents are not. Frank Grimes has had a hard life. Mr. Burns learns about him through a human interest news segment. Grimes was orphaned at age 18. He put himself through school. He studied hard for years while working 2 jobs. He earned a degree in nuclear physics through pure discipline and sacrifice. And by every conventional measure of the world's stated values, work hard, earn your rewards, do the right thing, Frank Grimes should have a good life. He has done everything the world told him to do. He does not have a good life. He has a small apartment between a bowling alley and a dog training school, no friends, no comfort, and a job he had to fight for at every step. Burns hires him after seeing the news segment, intending to make him executive vice president. Then Burns sees another news segment about a dog that rescued a baby and gives the executive vice president position to the dog. Grimes gets assigned to Sector 7G. Sector 7G is Homer's department. What happens next is where the episode becomes something more than a story about workplace conflict. Grimes watches Homer. He watches him eat at his desk without pausing. He watches him nearly drink a flask of sulfuric acid and have to be physically stopped. He watches Mr. Burns demote Grimes for the cost of the wall that the spilled acid destroyed. A wall destroyed because Grimes saved Homer's life, while Homer faces no consequence whatsoever. He watches Homer get invited to Burns's house for dinner, an honor Burns almost never extends to any employee. He watches Homer win a nuclear plant design contest that was intended for children, beating actual children with a model he built for fun. Grimes declares Homer his enemy. Homer, who does not process social conflict the way most people do, responds by trying to make friends with him. He invites Grimes to his house for a lobster dinner. This is the scene that breaks Grimes completely. He arrives at the house and sees how Homer lives. The nice home, the loving wife, the children, the photos on the wall from the time. Homer accidentally went to space. The Grammy Award from when Homer was briefly in a barbershop quartet. The racing car from the time Homer drove in a professional race. The artifacts of an extraordinary life lived by a man who has done nothing, by any conventional measure, to deserve any of it. Homer has been to space. Homer has won a Grammy. Homer has met celebrities and survived impossible situations and wandered through one remarkable experience after another, and he has done it all while being incompetent, lazy, and almost completely unconscious of his own good fortune. Grimes walks out of the dinner. He tells Homer he is a fraud. He tells him that he should not have the life he has and that he knows it. Homer, in response, looks mildly confused and then goes back to his lobster. The confrontation escalates at work when Burns announces a model nuclear plant design contest open to children. Homer enters the contest and wins. He stands at the front of the room accepting the first place ribbon while actual children sit in the audience in small chairs. Burns awards Homer the prize. Grimes watches from the back of the room and something in him gives way. He begins imitating Homer. He walks through the plant behaving the way Homer behaves, touching things he should not touch, ignoring safety protocols, being loud and oblivious and careless. He announces to the room that he is Homer Simpson, the man who can do whatever he wants with no consequences. He walks to a panel of high-voltage switches and grabs them without the insulating gloves that the safety sign explicitly says are required. He electrocutes himself. He dies. At the funeral, Homer falls asleep. When Lenny nudges him awake, Homer mumbles something nonsensical in his sleep. The other mourners laugh. The episode ends. Josh Weinstein, in his documented interview with the Simpsons fan site KnowHomers.net, confirmed in the Wikipedia article on the episode, explained the writers' thinking. They wanted to show that being Homer Simpson in any realistic version of the world could be genuinely life-threatening. They wanted to show what happens when someone who operates by the rules of reality comes into sustained contact with someone someone who does not. The conclusion they reached is the most honest and most uncomfortable thing the show ever committed to. The realistic person loses. Homer survives. Frank Grimes dies. The Wikipedia article on the episode documents that it is considered one of the darkest in the show's history, and that it split the opinion of the people who made it. Mike Reiss has named it as one of his least favorite episodes. Bill Oakley, Josh Weinstein, John Swartzwelder, and Matt Groening have all named it as a favorite. The disagreement is interesting. The people who love it because it is the show being fully honest about what Homer is. The person who does not love it does not love it for the same reason. What the episode is fully honest about is not comfortable. Robert Sloan, in an essay for the academic book Leaving Springfield, documented in the episode's Wikipedia article, describes Homer's enemy as an examination of the show looking at itself more directly than it had ever done. The essay argues that the episode is a deliberate critique of the Simpsons' own world, a questioning of the logic that allows Homer to be the everyman hero of a long-running comedy when, under any realistic set of conditions, Homer Simpson is a dangerous and destructive force. Grimes is the show's acknowledgement that its own premise requires a degree of reality suspension that becomes visible when you put a normal person inside it. The Freudian weight of this episode is significant and precise. Frank Grimes has what Freud would call a heavily developed superego. The superego is the part of the mind that carries the rules, the internalized voice of parents, teachers, society, and every authority figure that told you what is acceptable and what is not. Grimes's superego is enormous. It is the part of him that kept working when the world was cruel to him, that kept studying, that kept following the rules even when the rules offered nothing in return. The superego is what makes Grimes unable to simply accept Homer's existence and move on. The superego demands fairness. It demands that the world distribute rewards according to effort and merit, and when the world refuses, when Homer just keeps winning by doing nothing, the superego has nowhere to put the failure. Homer, as established in the University of Iceland academic thesis on The Simpsons, and confirmed throughout the show's own production history, functions primarily as the id. The id has no superego. The id does not follow rules. It does not see rules as relevant to its operations. Homer does not experience the world as a system of fairness and merit. He experiences it as a series of moments, each one offering either pleasure or discomfort, and he moves toward pleasure and away from discomfort with the consistency and the simplicity of a very young child. The collision between Grimes and Homer is a collision between the superego and the id. And what Freud understood, what the episode dramatizes with complete accuracy, is that in this collision, the ID does not lose. The ID cannot lose in the way Grimes expects it to lose, because the ID does not play by rules that would allow losing to happen. Homer cannot be shamed into self-awareness because shame requires a functioning superego to experience it. Homer cannot be embarrassed into reform because embarrassment requires the same thing. Grimes tries every tool the superego has available. He tries public humiliation, confrontation, exposure, the model contest setup, and none of it works. What Grimes eventually does, in his breakdown, is try to become the id. He imitates Homer. He tries to live without the rules the way Homer lives without them. And the episode makes the point with devastating economy. The id is not a costume you can put on. You cannot decide to stop having a superego. Grimes spent his whole life building those rules into the deepest part of himself, and when he tries to operate without them, he grabs the wrong switches and dies. Homer, who has never had those rules built into the same depth, is fine. Homer goes home and sleeps and dreams and shows up the next day. The essay in Leaving Springfield is right that the episode is the show examining its own logic. But it is doing something else, too. It is examining something Freud spent considerable time writing about: the cost of the superego. The superego is supposed to be the part of you that makes civilization possible. It is the part that keeps you from taking what you want and hurting people and destroying things because the id would find it satisfying. Freud believed the superego was necessary. He also believed it was a source of enormous suffering, that the gap between what the id wants and what the superego permits creates a permanent internal tension that is the defining psychological experience of a civilized person. Grimes embodies that gap completely. He wants the life Homer has. His superego will not let him reach for it without effort and merit. The id across the room has it without either. The gap between what Grimes wants and what his internalized rules tell him he can have is so enormous by the end of the episode that it tears him apart. He tries to cross from one side to the other, and the crossing kills him. Homer, at the funeral, sleeps. There is a detail in the episode that the TV tropes documentation flags. Even during his breakdown, Grimes is not entirely without decency. Before leaving the lobster dinner, he stops and politely says goodbye to Marge, Bart, and Lisa. He tells them it was nice to meet them. His anger is at Homer specifically. He has no grudge against Homer's family, who are not responsible for Homer's existence. This is not the behavior of a man who has simply gone mad. This is the behavior of a man whose moral compass is still running, even as the system it belongs to is failing. The superego, right up until the electrocution, is still sorting people into those who deserve his courtesy and those who do not. Homer, at this point in the series, Season 8, 1997, is not yet the fully exaggerated cartoon he would become in the seasons that followed. He is still recognizably the Homer of Seasons 4 through 7, flawed, oblivious, destructive in ways he does not intend, but not yet purely absurd. This is the last version of Homer who could plausibly destroy a real person without the show acknowledging it as a joke. In later seasons, the show would treat Homer's collateral damage as slapstick. In Homer's Enemy, it treats it as tragedy, Frank Grimes's tragedy, happening inside Homer's comedy. Weinstein's interview confirms. They wanted to show that the world Homer inhabits is only survivable for Homer. Everyone else pays. The show would return, in smaller ways, to this question throughout its run. What does Homer cost the people around him? But it never asked the question with the same directness again. Homer's Enemy is the one episode that walks the full distance of the implication and stands in the uncomfortable place it leads to. Homer is the id. The id wins. The people who live by rules lose. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The catastrophic effect of Homer's oblivious existence on Frank Grimes is visible and documented and intentional. What the show had been building toward in parallel, quietly, across episodes that looked like they were about something else entirely, was the same question applied to the people Homer loves. If Grimes, a stranger, was broken by exposure to Homer, what was happening inside the house? What had 18 years of living with the id done to Marge, who had been the one absorbing and managing and redirecting Homer's damage since before the show began? Section 4. The Woman Who Held Everything Together. Season 3, Episode 15 of The Simpsons aired February 6, 1992. David Stern wrote it, Mark Kirkland directed it. The episode is called Homer Alone, and it opens with a single extended sequence that is one of the most honest things the show ever built. A morning in the Simpson house, watched in real time through Marge's eyes. The sequence begins before anyone else is awake. Marge is already up. She makes breakfast. She packs lunches. She manages Bart's argument with Lisa about the bathroom. She gets Maggie dressed. She responds to Homer's requests from the bedroom. She remembers the thing nobody else remembered. She keeps track of the thing everyone else forgot. She does all of this simultaneously and without acknowledgement, the way she does it every morning, the way she has been doing it every morning for years before this episode begins, and will keep doing it for years after it ends. By the time the sequence is finished, the audience has watched Marge complete what amounts to a full working shift before 9 in the morning, without sitting down once, without anyone saying thank you, and without Marge herself giving any visible sign that this is extraordinary or unsustainable. She gets into the car and drives Homer to work, and continues managing the morning from the driver's seat. Then, on the Springfield Bridge, something gives. A song comes on the radio that she likes. She tries to sing along. Maggie knocks a carton of milk out of her hands and it spills across the seat. A small thing. The kind of small thing that happens every day in every family and usually gets absorbed and moved past. Marge does not move past it. She stops the car, on the bridge, in the middle of traffic. She holds the steering wheel, and she does not move, and she does not speak, and traffic backs up behind her, and eventually the police come, and eventually Springfield's news helicopters are circling above, and the traffic jam stretches for miles, and Marge is still sitting there. She is not having a dramatic, visible crisis. She is not crying or shouting or making a scene in any traditional sense. She is simply stopped. Whatever internal mechanism had been keeping her moving through every morning and every evening and every meal and every argument and every need has gone quiet. And with it quiet, she cannot go forward. The police eventually talk her down from the bridge. The incident makes the news. Homer watches it on television at work, and his initial response, documented across multiple episode analyses and confirmed by the show's own dialogue, is confusion about whether he is going to be in trouble. His first reaction to watching his wife have a public breakdown on a bridge is to worry about what it means for him personally. The id, in its purest form, interprets every event through the lens of its own comfort and discomfort. Marge's suffering registers to Homer as a logistical problem before it registers as anything else. The family eventually arranges for Marge to take a vacation alone at a resort called Rancho Relaxo. Homer stays home with Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. The show spends considerable time on Homer's incompetence at managing the household, the chaos that unfolds when the person who has been invisibly maintaining everything steps away. The comedy is real, and it lands. But underneath the comedy is the structural point the episode is making, which is that the household functions because Marge functions. And Marge functions because she does not stop. And the reason she does not stop is that she has built stopping into a category of behavior that is not available to her. Rancho Relaxo is where the episode becomes quietly devastating. Marge arrives at the resort and does not know what to do with herself. She has been defined by her role as the person who handles things for so long that when the things are temporarily removed, she is not sure who she is without them. She relaxes awkwardly. She calls home to check. She feels guilty about enjoying the quiet. The vacation that was prescribed to help her recover from the exhaustion of constant caregiving is itself colored by the habits of constant caregiving, because those habits live in her and not in the the circumstances. The University of Iceland academic thesis on The Simpsons, the BAA essay by Stefan Birger Stephenson, submitted to the Department of English in January 2013, formally identifies Marge as the ego of the show's psychological structure. The ego, in Freudian terms, is the part of the mind that mediates between the id's demands and the requirements of the external world. The id wants everything immediately. The world will not provide everything immediately. The ego negotiates. It delays, manages, redirects, and absorbs the gap between what the id wants and what reality allows. The ego is the part that keeps the person functional in society. The ego is also the part that bears the cost of that constant negotiation. Marge is the ego of the Simpson household. She has been managing the gap between Homer's id and the demands of family, neighborhood, school, finances, and social obligation since before the series began. She absorbs what would otherwise be chaos and converts it into something livable. She does this so consistently and so invisibly that the show can use her competence as a background condition for 20 minutes of Homer jokes without anyone, including Homer, appearing to register what that competence is costing her. Homer alone is the episode where the cost becomes visible. Not because Marge stops managing. She starts managing again the moment she gets back from Rancho Relaxo. But because for one episode, the show pauses Homer's story and looks at hers. And what it sees there is a woman who has been running at full capacity for so long that the system has no reserve left. The spilled milk on the bridge is not the cause of the breakdown. It is the moment when the accumulated weight of every unacknowledged mourning finally exceeds what one person can silently carry. Freud wrote extensively about what happens to the ego under sustained pressure from both sides, the id demanding gratification and the external world demanding conformity. The ego can manage this for a long time. It is built for exactly that management. But the ego is not built to do it alone, indefinitely, without support, without acknowledgement, and without any recognized space for its own needs. When the ego cannot put down the work of mediation, when every moment of every day is spent absorbing someone else's id and translating it into something the world can tolerate, the accumulated pressure eventually finds a way out. For Marge, it finds its way out on the Springfield Bridge in the form of an absolute, total, quiet stopping. The episode does not diagnose her. The show never uses clinical language about any of its characters, but the structure of what Homer alone depicts, the invisible labor, the suppressed needs, the eventual shutdown, is a precise illustration of what happens when the ego has no support system and no rest. 2 seasons earlier, in Season 2, Episode 18, Brush with Greatness, aired April 11th, 1991, written by Brian K. Roberts, directed by Jim Reardon, the show had shown the audience another dimension of what Marge has been suppressing. Homer finds old paintings she made as a teenager of Ringo Starr. They are genuinely good. The family had no idea she could paint at this level. Marge had a real artistic talent, and she had buried it. Not dramatically, not with visible grief, but in the quiet way that people set aside the parts of themselves that do not fit the life they are currently living. The circumstances of the buried talent are specific and canon. Marge's high school art teacher ridiculed a painting she made of Ringo Starr, tore it off the canvas, and threw it in the garbage in front of the class. Before giving up, she mailed one of her Ringo Starr paintings to the musician himself, asking for an honest opinion. She never got a response. She concluded her talent was not real and stopped painting. The giving up was not a choice made from clarity. It was a response to humiliation and silence, the two things most likely to make a person doubt what they are capable of. By the time Homer finds the paintings, years of marriage and motherhood and household management have elapsed. The painting is in a box in the attic. The talent never went away. When Marge takes an art class at Springfield Community College, as documented in the Brush with Greatness episode, her teacher, Professor Lombardo, played by John Lovitz, immediately recognizes her ability and puts her work in the college art show, where it wins first prize. The talent survived the burial intact. What the burial cost was the years she might have spent developing it. The Matt Groening, Jim Reardon, Brian K. Roberts, and Al Jean DVD commentary on the complete second season, released August 16, 2005, confirms that the original pitch for the episode involved Marge painting depressing pictures and the family realizing she was secretly unhappy. James L. Brooks developed the Burns portrait commission as the central plot, but the original instinct, that Marge's artistic suppression was connected to a deeper unhappiness, remained in the episode's emotional logic. The show was, from the beginning of this particular story, circling something real about what Marge had set aside in order to be the person everyone around her needed her to be. This is the specific shape of Marge's psychological life as the show builds it across multiple seasons. She suppresses her own needs and desires so consistently and so thoroughly that the suppression itself becomes invisible to her. She does not experience herself as sacrificing. She experiences herself as managing. The painting is in a box. The mornings run on time. The household functions. The children are fed. This is what success looks like from the inside when you are the ego. The system works, and the cost of keeping the system working is distributed so quietly across every hour of every day that it never appears as a single identifiable line item. Homer alone makes it appear as a line item. The bridge is the moment where the invisible accounting becomes visible, where the cost that has been spread across thousands of mornings suddenly presents itself all at once, in a stopped car, in backed up traffic, in a woman who cannot go forward. Homer's response to the breakdown and his response to Marge's vacation is worth sitting with specifically. He does not become a different husband after she comes back. He does not begin waking up early to make breakfast. He does not distribute the invisible labor differently or acknowledge that the system had been running on one person's effort while he slept. Homer loves Marge. The show is consistent and genuine about this across its entire run. The love is real. The obliviousness is also real. Both things are true simultaneously, and the show does not resolve the tension between them because the tension is the truth. The id cannot see the ego's labor. This is not a moral failure, it is a structural one. The id processes the world through its own comfort and discomfort. When Marge is successfully managing everything, Homer experiences the outcome of that management. A functioning home, fed children, clean clothes, a wife who is present, and he experiences it as background condition rather than as the product of continuous effort. The effort is invisible because it is successful. When it stops being successful, on the bridge, Homer's first instinct is still to process it through himself. The show never condemns Homer for this. The audience never fully condemns him either, which is part of what makes the show so precise about human behavior. Homer loves Marge. His love is not performed or strategic. When Marge is hurting, something in Homer genuinely responds to that, as the episode shows. He does eventually arrange the vacation. He does eventually try to manage the household. He does try in the only way he knows how. The trying is real. The trying is also insufficient, and it is insufficient in a way Homer cannot see clearly enough to fix. Marge comes home from Rancho Relaxo. The household reassembles. The mornings resume their rhythm. The painting goes back in the box, or rather, in the period between Brush with Greatness and Homer Alone, the talent that Brush with Greatness briefly brought to light recedes again into background. Marge is the ego. The ego goes back to work. That is what the ego does. The bridge moment passes, the vacation ends, the stopped car moves again. And somewhere in the accumulated weight of all those mornings, the show had built an argument about the hidden cost of being the person who keeps everything from falling apart. An argument it made not through speeches or confrontations, but through a woman sitting in a stopped car on a bridge, holding a steering wheel, in the middle of a traffic jam she caused by simply running out of the ability to keep going. The question the first 4 sections have been building toward is about what all of this looks like from the outside, what Homer's psychology costs the people who live closest to it. The answer in Section 3 was Frank Grimes, who could not survive exposure. The answer in Section 4 is Marge, who survives it but carries the weight of survival in ways the show documents without ever fully naming. Both answers are about the same thing. What happens to people who cannot match Homer's complete immunity to consequence? Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But there is a version of this question the show asks about Homer himself, about what it costs Homer to be Homer, whether the id's freedom from guilt and consequence comes with its own invisible price. That reckoning lives in one specific episode, built around one specific moment at a workstation, and it changes everything that came before it. Section 5. Do It for Her. Season 6, Episode 13 of The Simpsons aired January 22, 1995. Jennifer Crittenden wrote it. Swinton O. Scott III directed it. The episode is called And Maggie Makes 3, and it is structured as a flashback, the family sitting together during one of Marge's weekly no-television family hours, looking through photo albums, when Bart and Lisa notice something missing. There are no pictures of Maggie in the albums. None. Every other member of the family has photographs going back years. Maggie has nothing. Homer answers by telling the story of how Maggie came to exist. The episode then becomes that story, told in flashback, and by the time it is finished, it has done something that almost no other episode in the show's run manages. It has shown the audience what Homer Simpson looks like when reality costs him something real, something he cannot eat through or drink away or sleep off, and then shown them what he built from the rubble of that cost. The story begins with Homer's dream. Not a sleeping dream, a waking one, the kind that a person carries for years and sometimes gets to actually reach. Homer had been saving money while working at the power plant, putting aside enough to finally clear all of his debts. The day he deposits the final payment is shown in the episode with a kind of low-key joy that is completely earned. Homer has been disciplined about something for the first time in the show's memory, and it has worked. He is out of debt. He has done the thing. With the financial pressure lifted, Homer quits his job at the power plant. The quitting scene is one of the most satisfying sequences the show ever produced. Homer tells Mr. Burns exactly what he thinks of him. He plays Burns's bald head like a bongo drum. He burns a small wooden bridge as he drives away from the plant. He gets a job at Barney's uncle's bowling alley, a job that pays less, but that Homer loves with a completeness that his 8 years at the nuclear plant never produced. He has worked out a careful budget showing that so long as nothing changes, the family can survive on the bowling alley income, so long as nothing changes. Marge becomes pregnant. The episode does not dramatize this as a surprise twist. The audience knows from the beginning that Maggie exists, which means they know from the beginning of the flashback where it is going. The dramatic weight is not in the revelation. It is in watching Homer absorb it. He has to go back to the power plant. He has to beg for his job back from the man he just publicly humiliated and drove away from while a bridge burned behind him. Mr. Burns gives him the job. He also installs a plaque above Homer's workstation. Don't forget, you're here forever. The plaque is Burns doing what Burns does, using what limited power he has over Homer to ensure Homer stays broken. It is a small cruelty delivered with Burns's characteristic precision. A reminder in permanent letters that Homer's brief escape was an aberration, and this desk, this plant, this life of doing a job he hates to support obligations he did not plan for is where he actually lives. Homer sits at the desk with the plaque and goes back to work. The Screen Rant retrospective on this episode, published November 5th, 2025, calls Homer's return to the plant genuinely tragic, not in a dramatic, operatic way, but in the specific small tragedy of inevitability. The audience knew from the episode's first frame, because they know what the show is, that Homer works at the nuclear plant and not at a bowling alley. The ending was visible from the beginning. The tragedy is not in the surprise, it is in the watching, in seeing the gap between what Homer wanted and what he got close enough to touch close up, and then being pulled back to the desk. The Collider retrospective on the episode, published May 17, 2025, describes the Don't Forget You're Here Forever plaque as one of the show's defining images. The plaque is a weapon Burns uses. It is also, unintentionally, the setup for what comes at the end of the episode. Bart and Lisa, in the present of the story, hear the whole flashback and then ask the original question again. Where are the pictures of Maggie? Homer answers by taking them to his workstation at the nuclear plant. The walls around the desk under the plaque that says, "Don't forget, you're here forever," are covered entirely in photographs of Maggie, baby pictures, hundreds of them. They cover the plaque in a specific arrangement so that the letters not hidden behind photographs now read, "Do it for her." The Simpsons wiki describes this image as one of the saddest scenes in the show's entire history. The TV Tropes analysis of the episode calls the ending, widely considered, one of the most touching scenes in the series. Homer explains that the pictures are in the place where he needs the most cheering up. This is the episode that breaks the standard reading of Homer Simpson more completely than any other. The standard reading of Homer, the one that Frank Grimes operated on, the one that most surface-level analysis produces, is that Homer is a man without an interior, a man who feels hunger and acts on it, feels discomfort and avoids it, feels pleasure and pursues it, and otherwise moves through the world without any significant inner life. The id does not have an interior in the way that more developed psychological structures do. The id has wants. That is the beginning and the end of the id's experience of itself. And Maggie Makes Three shows the audience an interior. The plaque is the key. Homer did not have to do anything with it. The plaque is Burns's attempt to keep Homer feeling trapped, and the simplest response to it, the response that costs nothing and changes nothing, is to sit under it and let it do its work. Many people in Homer's position would do exactly that. The plaque would become part of the furniture of resignation, one more element of a job they hate that they have learned to stop seeing. Homer covered it with his daughter's face, not because anyone told him to, not because he was trying to make a point or perform a transformation, or demonstrate that he had grown as a person. The photographs are not for anyone else. They are in a place only Homer regularly sees, at a desk where he sits alone, doing a job he has hated since before the show began. He covered the plaque because he needed to be able to get through the days, and the only thing strong enough to do that was Maggie's face. He converted the weapon Burns gave him into a reason to keep going. Freud described a defense mechanism called sublimation, the process by which the ego takes an impulse or a feeling that cannot be expressed directly and redirects it into something constructive. Sublimation is generally considered the healthiest of the defense mechanisms because the energy of the original feeling does not disappear, it transforms. The grief and the rage and the disappointment go somewhere that builds rather than destroys. What Homer does with the plaque is sublimation of a very specific and very complete kind. The feeling that cannot be. Expressed directly is the grief of the lost dream, the bowling alley, the escape, the brief window when the budget balanced and the desk at the power plant was behind him. That grief cannot be spoken aloud without it sounding like resentment toward Maggie, who is innocent of everything. Homer cannot be angry at his infant daughter for existing. He cannot mourn the bowling alley without that mourning landing on her. So the grief cannot go in its natural direction. It needs somewhere else to go. It goes into the photographs. It goes into the arrangement. It goes into the daily act of sitting under Do It For Her and finding something there that is not resignation, but is instead a reason. The most unbearable thing, losing the dream, becomes the fuel for continuing to show up to the thing that replaced it. The Avocado's analysis of the episode describes Homer's sincerity as the quality that makes his childishness and apparent selfishness tolerable across the show's run. The episode proves the point. Homer did not install the photographs strategically. He installed them because he genuinely needed them. The need is real. The love behind the need is real. And both of those things, the need and the love, exist in a man the show has spent 5.5 seasons depicting as a creature of pure immediate impulse. The complexity does not contradict the earlier portrait. It deepens it. Homer's id is real. His oral fixation is real. His repetition of Abe's failures is real. His obliviousness to Marge's labor is real. Every section of this essay has been building a documented, episode-verified picture of a man whose psychological formation left him operating primarily on the pleasure principle with limited access to the internal tools most adults develop. That picture is accurate. The photographs are also accurate. Both are Homer. Freud did not argue that the id was the whole person. He argued that the id was a primary and powerful force, one that the ego and superego were built around managing. In Homer's case, the ego and superego are underdeveloped, but not absent. They are present in the specific, limited, imperfect way that the circumstances of Homer's childhood allowed them to develop. The absent mother, the damaging father, the tools that were never put in the box because nobody put them there. Given that formation, Homer has built what he can. What he built at his workstation is not nothing. It is, in its own way, the most honest thing in the episode. More honest than the comedy and more honest than the tragedy. A man who could not save his dream converted the place where the dream died into a daily act of love. Not for anyone watching, for himself, and for the daughter looking back at him from the photographs. The Collider piece on And Maggie Makes Three observes that the episode cements something about Maggie's place in the Simpson family that subsequent seasons would build on, that her birth, which cost Homer more than anything else the show ever took from him, produced in him a quality of love the other children, born before the bowling alley and the plaque and the photographs, never quite generated in the same form. Maggie arrived with the highest price tag. Homer paid it. The photographs are the receipt. There is also a smaller moment earlier in the episode that the closing image tends to overshadow, but that is doing equally important work. The moment Maggie is born, while Homer is still devastated about the bowling alley, still processing the return to the plant, still operating in the low-grade grief of the man whose escape hatch just closed, Maggie reaches out from the hospital blanket and grabs Homer's thumb. A tiny hand, an instinctive grip. Homer looks down at her, and everything else disappears. He picks her up and calls her the most beautiful baby girl in the whole world, and tells Marge to show a little enthusiasm, while Marge, exhausted from giving birth, smiles tiredly at them. The transformation is instant and total, and the show plays it completely straight. No joke undercuts it. No cutaway deflates it. Homer holds his daughter and loves her immediately and completely, and the grief about the bowling alley does not vanish. It is still there. It will be at the workstation tomorrow morning, but it is no longer the primary thing. The primary thing is the small hand on his thumb. This is the id encountering something the pleasure principle cannot fully account for. The id pursues gratification. Holding Maggie is not the kind of gratification the id normally moves toward. It is not food, not beer, not comfort, not escape. It is something heavier and quieter and more permanent than any of those things. Something that asks something of Homer rather than simply giving him something. And Homer, the man whose psychology has been shaped by absence and damage into something the show has spent years documenting with precision, reaches for it anyway. The photographs on the plaque are the continuation of that reach. Every morning, every day, do it for her. The episode shows what Homer is capable of when the thing he loves costs him something real. The id, pushed up against genuine loss, does not simply run toward the nearest available pleasure. It can build. It can convert. It can take the worst thing and make it into something that keeps a person going. This is not the Homer of most analytical writing about the show. This is not the Homer Frank Grimes died trying to disprove. This is the Homer who exists underneath the noise. The one the bowling alley was taken from. The one who covered the plaque. The one who sits at the desk every day under "Do It For Her" and goes back to work. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The show, having built this portrait across 5.5 seasons of documented evidence, would eventually ask what happens when Homer is given real power. Not the temporary elevation of the Stonecutter's Chosen One prophecy, but the specific, seductive, deeply Freudian experience of belonging to something that tells you, for the first time in your life, that you have been special all along. Section 6. The Chosen One Who Chose Nothing. Season 6, Episode 12 of The Simpsons aired January 8, 1995. John Swartzwelder wrote it. Jim Reardon directed it. Patrick Stewart guest starred as Number 1, the leader of the Springfield chapter of a secret society called the Stonecutters. The episode is called Homer the Great, and it was nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Music Composition for the song We Do, which the Stonecutters performed during Homer's initiation. The Wikipedia article on the episode confirms it has received universal acclaim and has been named one of the best episodes in the entire series by Gary Russell and Gareth Roberts in their book on The Simpsons. The episode begins with Homer noticing something about Lenny and Carl. They have a parking space closer to the plant entrance. The coffee in their mugs is better than the coffee in Homer's mug. Small things. The kind of small things that would not register to most people, but that register to Homer, because Homer is extraordinarily sensitive to the feeling that someone else is getting something he is not. He follows them after work. He discovers they are going to a meeting in a building with no sign on the door. He presses his face against the glass and watches them inside, warm, laughing, part of something that has a name and a handshake and a song and a set of rules that separates the people who belong from the people who do not. Homer does not belong. The realization lands on him with a weight the show plays for comedy, but that carries something real underneath it. Homer has spent his entire life in a version of this position, outside the glass, watching other people have something he cannot name but can feel the absence of. The absent mother, the damaging father, the workstation under the plaque, the bowling alley he almost got to keep. The shape of Homer's life is the shape of a person who keeps getting close to something and finding it is not available to him. The Stonecutters are a parody of the Freemasons and similar fraternal organizations. The Wikipedia article confirms this, and the episode's own content makes it explicit through every visual detail, from the ritual initiation to the secret handshake to the ancient charter the organization claims to follow. Patrick Stewart's number 1 announces during Homer's initiation that the Stonecutters have since ancient times split the rocks of ignorance that obscure the light of knowledge and truth. Then he says, "Now let's all get drunk and play ping pong." The gap between the ceremonial weight of the announcement and the immediate collapse into drinking and ping pong is the joke. The joke is also the point. The Stonecutters are not actually special. Their rituals are empty. Their secrets are trivial. The organization exists primarily as a social club for men who want to feel like they belong to something important. And the feeling of importance is generated not by anything the organization actually does, but by the fact that not everyone can join. Homer qualifies for membership because he is the son of a stonecutter, Abe, in a detail that lands with its own particular weight given everything earlier sections have established about Abe's relationship with Homer. Homer's access to belonging comes through the father who told him his birth was an accident. The membership card is, in a narrow sense, the one thing Abe's existence gave Homer that was genuinely useful. The initiation involves hazing. Homer is paddled. He is made to drag the stone of shame, a large rock attached to him by a chain. He is subjected to a series of rituals that are physically uncomfortable and deliberately humiliating. He endures all of it without complaint and with visible eagerness, because the paddling and the dragging and the humiliation are the price of admission, and Homer will pay whatever the price is. The need to belong is, at this moment in the episode, stronger than anything the id would normally move away from. Homer can tolerate pain if the pain is the cost of finally being inside the room. He is welcomed in. The Stonecutters give him a robe. They give him a number. The show never confirms what number Homer receives, though the episode's production background establishes that the numbering system was revisited decades later in the mobile game The Simpsons Tapped Out. He sits at the long table. He drinks with Lenny and Carl and the other members. He is inside. He belongs. The euphoria is total and immediate. Homer walks home afterward, and his entire bearing has changed. He greets Marge with the confidence of a man who has just had a fundamental problem solved. The problem the show has been documenting since the pilot, the restlessness, the reaching, the constant low-level hunger for something beyond the next meal or the next beer, appears briefly to have found its answer. Then Homer accidentally sits on the sacred stonecutter parchment. The sacred parchment is a document the organization treats with the reverence usually reserved for religious texts. Homer, who does not know this and would probably not have behaved differently if he did, sits on it and destroys it. The stonecutters strip him of his membership. They take his robe. As part of the penalty, they remove all his clothes and make him walk home naked, dragging the stone of shame through the streets of Springfield. This is where the episode's actual story begins. As Homer is being stripped of his robes, someone notices a birthmark on his body. The birthmark is in the exact shape of the stonecutter emblem. The stonecutters have an ancient prophecy, confirmed in the episode's own dialogue and documented across the Simpsons wiki, about a chosen one who will be identified by this mark and who will lead the organization to greatness. Homer, who moments ago was being expelled for sitting on their parchment, is suddenly the fulfillment of a prophecy that predates everyone in the room. The celebration that follows is the episode's funniest extended sequence. Homer is crowned in a ceremony the show shoots as a parody of the final scene of the 1987 film The Last Emperor, as confirmed in the episode's Wikipedia article. He sits on a throne. The other stonecutters bow. Patrick Stewart's number one, who had just finished presiding over Homer's expulsion, now presides over his coronation with the same ceremonial gravity. Homer has gone from being dragged home naked in disgrace to being declared a king in the space of approximately 4 minutes. The stonecutters begin using Homer's status as the chosen one to get things done for them. They want Homer to abuse his special position to benefit the organization. Homer goes along with this enthusiastically at first. He uses his power to get the stonecutters' preferred brand of beer served at the plant. He uses it to have a short road paved exclusively for their use. The small-scale corruption is completely in character. Homer treats the power the way the id treats any resource, which is as something to be used for immediate gratification. But Lisa, watching all of this, confronts Homer. She tells him he has power he is not using for anything that actually matters. She points out that he could use his position to help people, to do something real with the status the prophecy has given him. Homer listens to Lisa in the specific way he sometimes listens to Lisa, which is to say, eventually, after some resistance, he actually hears her. He starts directing the stonecutters toward charity work. They build a hospital. They feed the hungry. They use the organization's considerable resources, implied throughout the episode to be substantial and far-reaching, to do things that have genuine positive impact. Homer, as the chosen one, redirects the entire apparatus of the secret society toward helping people. The stonecutters hate it. The Simpsons wiki confirms they are not interested in helping people. They joined the organization to drink and play ping pong and feel special, not to build hospitals. The members grow increasingly resentful. They eventually leave the stonecutters entirely and form a new organization called the Ancient Mystic Society of No Homers, a club whose membership criteria, documented in the episode's own dialogue, is explicitly that Homer cannot join. Homer is back outside the glass. He is the chosen one of an organization that no longer exists in a meaningful form. He has all the prophesied power and none of the thing the power was supposed to give him, which was the feeling of belonging. The feeling lasted for a brief window between his coronation and the stonecutters' collective decision to leave. Now he is in the same position he was in at the beginning of the episode, aware that other people belong to something and that he does not. Marge finds him in the now empty Stonecutters Hall, surrounded by the artifacts of an organization that has dissolved around him. She sits with him. She tells him that he does belong to an exclusive club, the Simpson family, and that their wedding rings are the membership symbols. It is a warm moment, and the show plays it genuinely. But Homer's expression during the scene carries something the warmth cannot entirely cover. The family is real. The love in the family is real. The family is also not what Homer was looking for when he pressed his face against the glass at the beginning of the episode. Freud published Group Psychology and the Analysis of the Ego in 1921. The argument he makes in it is specific and applicable here with very little adjustment. Freud's position was that human beings have a deep structural need to belong to groups, and that this need is not primarily social, but psychological. It is connected to the same part of the mind that forms around early experiences of being held and recognized and told that you matter. When the early experiences of being held and recognized and told you matter are inadequate, when the mother disappears and the father tells the child his birth was an accident, the group becomes a substitute for what the primary relationships failed to provide. The group does not provide it, though. That is Freud's crucial point. The group can generate the feeling of being chosen, of being special, of being inside rather than outside. But the feeling is borrowed. It depends on the group's continued existence and continued recognition of the individual. The moment the group dissolves or withdraws its recognition, the individual is back where they started, with the same original deficit that sent them looking for the group in the first place. Homer's arc in Homer the Great is a precise dramatization of this. The stonecutters give him the feeling of belonging. The feeling is real while it lasts. Then the chosen one status arrives and gives him an even more intense version of the same feeling. He is not just a member, he is the prophesied leader, the one the whole organization has been waiting for. The feeling at the coronation is the most intense version of external validation the show has ever given Homer. He has been told, by an entire room of people performing ancient ritual, that he was chosen before he was born. The California Freemason magazine piece, published February 21st, 2020, written to mark the episode's 25th anniversary, documents that the stonecutters were designed as an affectionate parody of fraternal organizations, specifically the Freemasons, and that the episode was analyzed by actual Freemasons who recognized the accuracy of the satirical portrait. The piece confirms the episode aired January 8, 1995, and notes that the song We Do, which lists all the things the stonecutters supposedly control, who controls the British Crown, who keeps the metric system down, was nominated for an Emmy. The Emmy nomination for the song is its own form of confirmation about what the episode was doing. The song is funny because it is absurd. The stonecutters claim to control everything from science to whether the Loch Ness Monster exists. But it is also the most complete expression of what Homer was buying when he wanted to join. Not just belonging, but the feeling that the group he belonged to mattered, that the things they did and the secrets they kept had weight in the world. The gap between the ceremonial grandeur of the song and the ping-pong that follows is the gap between what groups promise and what they deliver. Homer receives the maximum version of what the group can promise, the chosen one, the fulfillment of prophecy, the man the organization was built around waiting for, and still ends up alone in the empty hall. The Avocado's analysis of the episode makes the observation that Homer's genuine attempt to use his power for good, the hospitals, the charity work, is what destroys the organization. His one moment of real leadership, guided by Lisa's moral clarity, is precisely what the other members cannot accept. The organization was not built to do good. It was built to make its members feel good. When Homer conflates the two, the members leave. The show encodes a quiet, devastating point. The group that promises meaning delivers comfort, and when someone tries to convert the comfort into actual meaning, the other members discover that meaning is not what they came for. Homer, who wanted belonging, briefly had it. Then he tried to give it purpose. The purpose destroyed the belonging. He is the chosen one of a prophecy that dissolved the moment he acted on it. The empty hall is the same image as the car on the highway, and the workstation under the plaque, and the grave Homer fell into in Mother Simpson. Different episodes, different plots, different jokes. The same underlying shape. A man who keeps arriving at the place where the thing he was reaching for used to be, and finding the reaching has already moved it somewhere else. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Stonecutters episode is about belonging. What the show had not yet directly examined, what the next stage of the Freudian portrait required, was the specific self-destruction that runs through Homer's relationship with his own body, the deliberate and gleeful dismantling of his health, pursued with the same goal-oriented enthusiasm that Homer brought to the bowling alley savings plan, is one of the most precise illustrations of what Freud called the death drive the show ever committed to screen. Section 7. The Man Who Tried to Unmake Himself. Season 7, Episode 7 of The Simpsons aired November 5th, 1995. Dan Greaney wrote it, his first episode for the show, confirmed in the Wikipedia article on the episode. Jim Reardon directed it. The episode is called King Size Homer, and it is built around a premise so specific and so committed that it reads, once you know what you are looking at, less like a comedy plot and more like a clinical case study wearing a cartoon as a disguise. The episode begins with Mr. Burns introducing a mandatory morning exercise program for all Springfield nuclear power plant employees. The employees gather in the parking lot. An instructor leads them through calisthenics. Most of the workers, even Lenny and Carl, even characters the show has never previously shown any interest in fitness, participate without significant complaint. Homer participates for approximately 30 seconds before looking for an exit. The show establishes this clearly and without ambiguity. Homer does not dislike this particular exercise program. Homer is constitutionally opposed to any demand that his body be placed in discomfort in service of a future benefit. The pleasure principle, which operates entirely in the present tense, has no mechanism for weighing current pain against future health. The body hurts now. That is the only information available. The information produces an immediate and total desire to stop. Homer tries to hide in the bathroom. Smithers, who has apparently developed a system for locating employees who are avoiding the exercise program, finds him and has security drag him outside. Homer, back in the parking lot, attempts to injure himself. He walks through a hard hat area, positioning himself hopefully beneath objects that might fall on him. He pours oil on the floor and tries to slip. He attempts multiple variations of the same basic strategy: produce an injury significant enough to qualify for disability status, and use that status to work from home and avoid the exercise program forever. The attempts fail. Homer then does what Homer does when the obvious approach is not working. He opens a book. He finds a workplace disability manual and reads through it, running down the list of qualifying conditions with growing frustration. Carpal tunnel syndrome, no. Lumbar lung, no. Juggler's despair, no. Achy breaky pelvis, no. The dialogue is confirmed verbatim in the episode transcript archived at the Simpsons archive. Homer's delivery of this list, genuine disappointment at each condition he cannot manufacture, is one of Dan Castellaneta's finest pieces of comedic timing in the entire series. Then Homer finds it: hyper-obesity, a condition defined in the episode's manual as weighing more than 300 pounds, which qualifies a person as disabled and legally entitled to work from home. Homer currently weighs 239 pounds. He needs to gain 61 pounds to qualify. The Wikipedia article on the episode confirms this arithmetic and notes that the writers, in production discussions documented in the DVD commentary, specifically decided they did not want Homer to come across across as a glutton during the weight gain sequence. They wanted the viewer to barely see Homer actually eating after he reaches the goal. The focus was to be on Homer's enthusiasm and goal orientation, the same qualities the show uses sympathetically in episodes like And Maggie Makes Three, where Homer's careful budgeting and disciplined saving are played as genuinely admirable. Here, those same qualities are applied to the deliberate destruction of his own body, and the show plays that with the same straight-faced commitment. Homer recruits Bart to help him gain the weight. The two of them work on the project together with the collaborative energy the show usually reserves for schemes that are wrong in smaller ways. Bart, who has his own complicated relationship with authority and rules, is an enthusiastic partner. Lisa, who has her grandmother Mona's social conscience and her own developing understanding of consequence, objects. She tells Homer this could endanger his health. She tells him he is abusing a program that most people would want access to for legitimate reasons. Homer hears this, processes it through the id's standard filter. Does this information change what I want? No. Therefore, it is not relevant, and continues the project. The AV Club review of the episode, published in the show's classic Simpsons coverage, makes the observation that Homer is ecstatic about gaining weight in a way that pop culture almost never allows. The review notes that the cultural default around obesity is alarm and shame and exercise montages, and that king-size Homer goes in exactly the opposite direction. Homer's happiness at 300 pounds is genuine and unqualified. He has achieved his goal. The goal was his own physical expansion, pursued deliberately, and he is proud of it. The DVD commentary, confirmed in the Wikipedia article and attributed to the episode's production team, contains Bill Oakley's recollection of the discussion about the episode's title. The writers wanted a title that made Homer sound proud. King-size Homer was chosen because it carried that pride explicitly. Not fat Homer, not too much Homer, king-size. The word king sitting at the front of the title does real work. It frames what follows as Homer's domain rather than Homer's failure. When Homer reaches 300 pounds, he is granted work-from-home status. A computer workstation is set up at the house. Homer begins working remotely. He teases Bart and Lisa about having to go to school while he stays home. He sits in his muumuu, the garment the writers specifically chose for his expanded state, confirmed in the DVD commentary, and manages his work responsibilities from his couch with the minimum possible effort and the maximum possible comfort. For a brief window, Homer has engineered exactly the life his id would design if given unlimited power to do so. Warmth, food, stillness, no external demands on his body, and absolute freedom from the morning exercise program that started all of this. Freud introduced the concept he called the death drive in his 1920 work, Beyond the Pleasure Principle. It was one of his most controversial ideas, so controversial that many of his own followers rejected it or tried to revise it into something less uncomfortable. The basic argument was this: alongside Eros, the life instinct that drives people toward connection and growth and survival, there exists a counterforce. Freud called it Thanatos. The death drive is the pull toward dissolution, toward unmade things, toward the relief of pressure, toward the state before the demands of being alive began. It does not manifest as a conscious desire to die. It manifests as the compulsion to undo, to eat until the body protests, to drink until consciousness softens, to pursue ease so total that it shades into the erasure of effort, ambition, and growth. King-size Homer is Thanatos as a sitcom plot. Homer does not want to die. Homer does not experience his weight gain project as self-destructive in any conscious way. He experiences it as clever, as a solution to a problem, which it technically is. But the solution he reaches for, when the exercise program creates discomfort he cannot tolerate, is to expand his own body until the body itself becomes a wall between him and the world's demands. He literally makes himself larger in order to make the world's ability to reach him smaller. The muumuu is not just a garment, it is a boundary. The 300-pound body is not just a body, it is a structure Homer has built around himself to reduce the number of things the outside world can require of him. The Avocado's analysis of the episode makes the observation that what makes Homer sympathetic even in this premise is the genuine joy he takes in it. The essay notes that Homer functions as a hero for people who hate working jobs they did not choose and would not choose if the choice were real. His pursuit of the muumuu and the couch and the remote workstation is a fantasy the audience recognizes. The fantasy of simply opting out of the performance that adult life requires. The difference between the audience's fantasy and Homer's action is that Homer actually does it. He does not fantasize about gaining 61 pounds to work from home. He gains 61 pounds to work from home. This is the id operating at full capacity without the friction that other people's internal systems would generate. Most adults have a superego voice that intervenes between the fantasy of opting out and the act of opting out. The voice says, "This will hurt you. This is irresponsible. This is not what people do. This is not acceptable." Homer's superego, built on the damaged foundation of the absent mother and Abe's particular brand of emotional withdrawal, does not generate that friction reliably or powerfully enough to stop him. The fantasy becomes the plan, becomes the 300-pound man in the muumuu watching television while his children go to school. The crisis arrives not because Homer has a change of heart about his body or his health, but because Homer, working from home, makes a mistake at the nuclear plant. A critical safety system that Homer was supposed to monitor via computer requires a physical response that Homer cannot provide remotely. A catastrophic accident is developing at the plant. Homer, the man who is supposed to be the safety inspector, is sitting on his couch at 300 pounds and cannot get there in time through conventional means. What follows is the episode's most physically demanding sequence. Homer, in his muumuu, attempting to reach the plant before disaster strikes, trying to fit himself into a car, into a cab, ultimately arriving too late through the front door and stopping the meltdown by accident, by virtue of his own body being large enough to physically block the mechanism that was about to fail. His 300-pound body saves the plant. He prevented the disaster with the same thing he built to avoid responsibility. The show plays this as triumph. Burns, in the aftermath, commends Homer for preventing what could have been a catastrophic event. Homer receives praise for the same body he built to avoid work. The DVD commentary confirms that the writers struggled with the ending, the question of how to get Homer back to his original weight before the next episode, and that the ending was acknowledged internally as a slight cheat because the resolution comes from external plot mechanics, rather than from Homer deciding to be different. Jennifer Malkowski's review for DVD Verdict, documented in the Wikipedia article, called Homer's shopping trip to the clothing store The Vast Waistband the best part of the episode. The name of the store is a joke that operates on two levels simultaneously. It is a ridiculous name for a clothing store, and it is an accurate description of where Homer now exists. The vast waistband, the expanded perimeter, the body as a buffer zone between the id and the world's demands. Colin Jacobson at DVD Movie Guide called King Size Homer one of the series' more cynical episodes in his documented review, while also describing it as packed with laughs. The cynicism and the laughs are not in conflict. The episode is funny precisely because the cynicism is accurate. Homer's solution to the exercise program is genuinely clever within the episode's logic. The cynicism is that the solution works. He gains the weight, he gets the dispensation, he works from home, and the only consequence is the plant crisis, which he accidentally resolves with the body he built to avoid consequences. Dave Foster of DVD Times, in his review documented in the Wikipedia article, noted that Homer and Bart's collaboration on the weight gain project shows the two connecting in a genuine way, that Bart's enthusiasm for helping Homer with something deeply inadvisable reflects the actual warmth between them when the situation is, in Foster's words, oh so wrong. This observation points at something the episode contains that sits alongside the Thanatos reading without contradicting it. Homer's self-destruction, when it is goal-oriented and enthusiastic, generates connection. He and Bart bond over the weight gain project in a way they do not always bond over things that are sensible and healthy. The death drive, as Freud described it, is not antisocial in its experience. It is pleasurable. The pull toward dissolution feels, from the inside, like relief, like the loosening of something that had been held too tight. Homer gaining 61 pounds and sitting in his moo-moo is not suffering. Homer is genuinely happy. The moo-moo is comfortable, the couch is soft, the house is warm. The exercise program cannot reach him here. This is what the death drive feels like when it is winning. Not darkness, not despair, not the obvious signs of something going wrong. It feels like finally having enough room, like expanding into a space that had always been too small. The broader pattern, the donuts consumed in quantities that no body requires, the beer drunk in volumes the show treats as normal for Homer, but that would be medically alarming for anyone else, the preference for stillness over movement in every situation where the choice is available, is the same drive expressed in smaller daily increments. King-size Homer compresses it into a single plot, so the shape of it is visible. Homer does not eat to satisfy hunger. Homer does not drink to quench thirst. He eats and drinks to manage the gap between what the id wants, total ease, total comfort, freedom from every demand, and what the world is willing to provide. The food is the moo-moo before the moo-moo. The beer is the couch before the couch. Every donut is Homer looking for the place where the world cannot make him exercise. Freud argued that the death drive and the life instinct are not opposites that cancel each other. They run in parallel, constantly. The same person who reaches for the donut also covers the workstation plaque with Maggie's photographs. The same man who gains 61 pounds to avoid exercise also sits on the hood of his car watching the stars after his mother drives away. Thanatos and Eros are both Homer. The dissolution and the love are both Homer. The moo-moo and the do-it-for-her are both Homer. The episode ends with Homer restored to his previous weight. Back at the plant, the moo-moo folded away. The morning exercise program presumably continues. Homer will look for another exit from it. The id does not conclude. The id does not learn lessons and carry them forward as wisdom. The id processes the present moment and moves to the next present moment, and the next one after that, each one requiring its own fresh negotiation between what Homer wants and what the world is willing to allow. But the wanting is not random. It is not arbitrary. The wanting has a shape, built from specific absences and specific damages, and specific moments that this essay has been documenting since section 1. The donuts and the beer and the 61 pounds and the moo-moo are Homer's answers to questions he has been carrying since before the show began. The questions were installed by a mother who disappeared, and a father who stayed, and a childhood that did not provide the tools a person needs to meet the world's demands without sometimes trying to unmake themselves. The death drive is loudest in King Size Homer, but it runs quietly through every section before it. In the food Homer uses to fill the hole Mona left, in the obliviousness Homer uses to avoid feeling the cost of Abe's words, in the sleep Homer falls into at Frank Grimes's funeral. The dissolution is always running. King Size Homer is just the episode where it gets to be the main character. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What the show had not yet done, at this point in its portrait of Homer's psychology, was examine what happens when Homer's hunger for recognition, the need that sent him pressing his face against the stonecutter's window, is directed not at a secret society, but at his own daughter. The specific, documented, quietly devastating way Homer's need to be seen collides with Lisa's need to be understood is the next piece of the portrait, and it is the one that lands the hardest. Section 8, The Father Lisa Needed and the One She Got. Season 2, Episode 19 of The Simpsons, aired April 25, 1991. John Vitti wrote it. Rich Moore directed it. The episode is called Lisa's Substitute, and Dustin Hoffman guest starred as substitute teacher Mr. Bergstrom, credited in the episode not under his real name, but under the pseudonym Sam Edick, a detail confirmed in the Wikipedia article on the episode. The pseudonym was Hoffman's choice. He did not want the guest appearance to become a publicity event. He wanted to do it quietly, because he believed in what the episode was doing. That belief is visible in every scene he appears in. Mr. Bergstrom is not a comic guest character. He is not there to do a funny voice or appear in a single scene for the sake of the credit. He is the emotional center of the episode, and Hoffman plays him with the specific warmth of someone who understands exactly what the character represents to Lisa and what the episode is asking of him. The setup is straightforward. Lisa's teacher, Miss Hoover, takes medical leave after believing she has contracted Lyme disease. It later turns out the illness was psychosomatic, documented in the Wikipedia article. But by the time that becomes relevant, the substitute has already arrived, and the episode's real story is already running. Mr. Bergstrom walks into Lisa's classroom and immediately does something Miss Hoover has never done, and Homer has never done, and the show has not shown any adult doing for Lisa with any consistency. He pays attention to her, not politely, not as a performance of good teaching. He actually listens when she speaks. He responds to what she says rather than to what he expected her to say. He teaches in a way that treats the students as people whose thinking matters. And Lisa, who has been sitting in classrooms and at dinner tables and in the back seats of cars, waiting for an adult to register that she is there and that her mind is real, responds to this with the full force of everything she has been saving up. She falls for him. Not romantically. The episode is careful about this, and the show handles it with complete delicacy. What Lisa feels for Mr. Bergstrom is the specific, overwhelming attachment that a child develops toward the first person who shows them the kind of attention they have been starved of. It is not a crush in the ordinary sense. It is the recognition of a deficit so deep and so long-standing that the person who first addresses it becomes, in the child's emotional life, irreplaceable. The Simpsons Wiki documents the episode's plot in detail. Marge suggests that Homer take Lisa to a museum, hoping the two of them can spend meaningful time together. Homer agrees, but his primary interest is in helping Bart with his class president campaign, rather than in engaging with Lisa. He goes to the museum because Marge makes him go. He is physically present and emotionally absent in the specific way that the show has been establishing as Homer's default setting with Lisa across 2 seasons. At the museum, Lisa runs into Mr. Bergstrom. The two of them begin talking, the real, substantive kind of talking that Lisa and Homer cannot manage because Homer does not have the vocabulary for the things Lisa needs to discuss. Homer is nearby. He says something that displays his ignorance about what they are looking at. Lisa is embarrassed. Not the standard child embarrassed by parent embarrassment that sitcoms use for easy comedy. Something quieter and more painful than that. The embarrassment of a child who has been hoping each time that this will be the moment the parent surprises her, and who finds each time that it is not that moment. Mr. Bergstrom takes Homer aside. The Wikipedia article confirms this scene. Bergstrom speaks privately with Homer and tells him that he sees a void in Lisa and Homer's relationship. He tells Homer that Homer is a negligent father toward his daughter. He does not say this with cruelty. The episode's dialogue and Hoffman's performance frame it as a genuine attempt to help rather than an accusation. But the words are direct and specific, and Homer receives them with the confusion of someone being told something about themselves they do not have the internal equipment to fully process. Homer's response, across the rest of the episode, is an attempt to be more present with Lisa. The attempt is real. The show does not play it as cynical or fake. Homer is trying. The trying is also inadequate in the specific way Homer's trying tends to be inadequate. He shows up in the forms he understands while missing the form Lisa actually needs. He does not become someone who engages with Lisa's thinking. He becomes someone who is physically nearby more often, which is a different thing and a lesser thing, and the only thing Homer's particular formation allows him to reliably produce. Miss Hoover returns. Mr. Bergstrom's assignment ends. Lisa rushes to his apartment to find him gone. He has taken a new job elsewhere. She runs to the train station. The Wikipedia article documents the scene. She reaches him on the platform as he is about to board. She tells him, crying, that she will be lost without him. He replies that the life of a substitute teacher is always moving, that he goes where students need him most. He writes her a note and tells her that whenever she feels alone, the note contains everything she needs to know. She reads the note on the platform as the train pulls away. The note says, "You are Lisa Simpson." The scene is one of the most quietly devastating in the show's early run. The note does not offer comfort in the conventional sense. It does not promise that things will be fine or that someone is coming to help. It offers recognition. It tells Lisa that who she is, without qualification or addition, is enough. That the thing she already is contains what she needs. Mr. Bergstrom gives her, in 4 words on a piece of paper, the thing Homer has been unable to give her across 2 full seasons. The confirmation that she is seen, that she is specific, that she is not a background detail in someone else's story. That night at the dinner table, Lisa is visibly devastated by his departure. Homer says something dismissive. The Wikipedia article on the episode documents what happens next. Lisa lashes out and calls Homer a baboon. The word is specific, not stupid, not bad, not any of the things a child might reach for. A baboon. A creature that resembles a person but operates below the level of genuine human complexity. It is the word of a child who has been disappointed so many times that the disappointment has curdled into something sharp. Homer is hurt, genuinely, visibly hurt. Dan Castellaneta's performance in the scene that follows is one of the most careful pieces of acting in the first 2 seasons of the show. Homer does not get angry. He does not retaliate. He goes to Lisa's room and finds her crying at her desk, and he sits with her, and he tries to say something that will help. He cannot quite do it. He does not have the words for what Lisa is experiencing because the loss she is processing, the loss of the adult who finally saw her, is not a category of loss Homer has ever had language for. He tells her he does not understand how it feels to lose someone important to you, and then he pauses, and the episode leaves that pause open for just long enough. Because Homer does know how it feels to lose someone important. Homer has been living with that particular loss since he was a child. The mother who left. The father who stayed and was absent anyway. Homer's entire life has been shaped by losses of exactly this kind, and he has never developed the language for them because the losses happened before language was available. He cannot give Lisa what she needs from the conversation. But he stays. He does not leave when the conversation gets painful. He does not redirect to something more comfortable. He stays in the room with his daughter's grief and sits inside his own inadequacy with enough steadiness that Lisa, eventually, is slightly consoled. Not because Homer says the right thing, but because he stays long enough for the not right things to fill the space and make it slightly less empty. The Freudian weight of this episode sits in a specific and documented place. The concept at work here is what Freud described in his early writings on object relations, the way the child's mind forms around the primary relationships it is given, and what happens when those relationships fail to provide adequate recognition and attunement. When the primary caregiver, the parent, the first attachment figure, cannot meet the child's need to be seen, the child does not stop needing to be seen. The need does not dissolve. The child continues to carry it, and the need becomes organized around finding a substitute, a teacher, an older friend, a mentor, anyone who provides what the primary relationship could not. Mr. Bergstrom is Lisa's substitute object in the precise Freudian sense. He does not arrive in her life because she went looking for him. He arrives because Miss Hoover gets sick and the school sends a replacement. But Lisa's response to him is not proportional to what he actually is, a temporary teacher doing his job with unusual warmth and skill. Her response is proportional to the size of the need he addresses, which is enormous because the need has been accumulating since before the show began. The Simpsons wiki confirms that the episode establishes the emotional core of Homer and Lisa's relationship with more precision and honesty than any previous episode. Before Lisa's substitute, the show had played the Homer-Lisa dynamic primarily for contrast comedy, the dumb father and the smart daughter, creating situations where the gap between them generates jokes. Lisa's substitute takes that same gap and looks at it without the comedy buffer, and what it sees there is a child who is hungry for a kind of recognition her father cannot reliably provide, and a father who loves her completely and cannot translate that love into the specific form she needs. This is not a portrait of a bad father. The episode is careful about this. Homer loves Lisa. The love is genuine, and the show has established it across 2 seasons with enough consistency that the audience does not doubt it. The problem is not the absence of love. The problem is that love alone, without the capacity to meet another person in the specific place they need to be met, leaves a gap that the other person feels regardless of how much love is present. Homer's gap with Lisa is traceable through the same route this essay has been traveling since section 1. Mona Simpson was gone before Homer had the chance to learn from the person whose job it was to teach him how to be emotionally present with someone who needs him. Abe Simpson stayed and modeled a version of fatherhood built on dismissal and discouragement and the periodic accusation that Homer's existence was a mistake. The tools Homer would need to meet Lisa in the place she needs to be met were never put in the box. He reaches for them and finds air. The TV tropes analysis of the episode documents that Mr. Bergstrom serves as a direct foil to Homer, not as a villain, not as someone who threatens the family, but as someone whose presence makes visible, by contrast, what the family is missing. He is the positive example that Homer's failure to be that example is measured against. The show does not make Bergstrom perfect. He leaves, which is its own form of abandonment, and the episode acknowledges the pain of his departure without pretending it does not sting. But his departure is unavoidable. His job is temporary. Homer's job is not temporary, and the gap Bergstrom temporarily filled is one Homer is still present and still unable to fill when the train pulls away. Dustin Hoffman's decision to use a pseudonym, Sam Edick, a name that functions as a quiet pun on the word Semitic, a piece of wordplay Hoffman has confirmed was intentional, reflects his own investment in the episode's seriousness. He did not want his name on the episode because he did not want the episode to become about him. He wanted Mr. Bergstrom to be real on his own terms, and the pseudonym was the way he protected that. The AV Club and other critical sources have noted that the performance is among the finest guest appearances in the show's history precisely because of this quality. Hoffman disappears into the character rather than performing alongside it. The note, "You are Lisa Simpson," is the episode's most lasting image. It has been referenced and quoted in critical writing about the show for more than 30 years. What makes it last is not just the warmth of the sentiment, but the precision of it. It does not say, "You are wonderful," or "You are smart," or "You are going to be fine." It says, "You are Lisa Simpson," which is to say, the thing you already are is the thing. Not a better version, not a future version. The present, specific, complicated, 8-year-old who called her father a baboon version. That version is enough. Homer cannot tell her this. The words are not in him. The capacity to see Lisa at that level of specificity and reflect it back to her is not something his formation gave him. He stays in the room. He tries. He loves her in the full and genuine and imprecise way that a man shaped by absence and damage loves the people he is responsible for, which is to say, with everything he has, and with the permanent, unresolvable ache of knowing that everything he has is not quite the right shape for what they need. What the show built across Lisa's substitute and the episodes surrounding it is not an argument that Homer is a bad father. It is something more honest and more uncomfortable than that. The argument is that Homer's damage, the absent mother, the dismissive father, the childhood built without the tools for emotional attunement, passes forward not through cruelty, but through incapacity. He cannot give Lisa what she needs because nobody gave it to him. The chain does not stop at Homer. It runs through him and touches the next generation at every point where his formation left gaps. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The last section arrived with the one Freudian concept the show had been building toward across every section without naming it directly. The way Homer's psychological structure, with all its hungers and repressions and repetitions and self-destructions, was mirrored and amplified in the son who inherited the chain most completely. Not Lisa, who has Mona's intelligence and enough of her own formation to build around what Homer cannot provide. Bart, who got the strangulation and the "you were not wanted" and the full, unfiltered transmission of everything Abe gave Homer, and who built an entire personality around surviving it. Section 9. 9, The Boy Who Learned from the Strangling. Season 6, Episode 10 of The Simpsons, Grandpa vs. Sexual Inadequacy, the episode that gave Section 2 its spine, contains a detail that most viewers absorb and move past without fully registering what it means. During the argument in the car, when Abe tells Homer his birth was an accident and Homer pulls over and tells his father to get out, Abe grabs Homer by the throat first. The motion is fast. The show does not linger on it. It is gone almost before it registers. But the TV Tropes documentation of the episode records it specifically. Abe says, "Why you little," and strangles Homer, and identifies it as a direct parallel to the gesture Homer performs on Bart throughout the entire run of the series. The parallel is not an accident of animation. The show built it deliberately. The writers confirmed in the DVD commentary, Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, on the complete 6-season DVD released August 16, 2005, that the episode was designed to make the generational chain of bad parenting explicit. Abe damaged Homer. Homer damages Bart. The strangulation is the chain made visible in a single physical gesture, passing from one generation to the next with the precision of something inherited rather than chosen. Bart Simpson is the character the show built to carry the full weight of that transmission. Not Lisa, who has Mona's intelligence running through her as a kind of counterbalance, something from outside the immediate Simpson father-son line that gives her resources Homer never had. Bart got the direct line. Bart got the strangulation, the "you were not wanted," the casual undermining, and the version of Homer's love that is real and enormous, and comes packaged inside the same damaged container that Abe's love came in. Bart got all of it, and what the show documents across its run is what a child builds from that particular set of materials. The episode that makes the Homer-Bart relationship most completely visible is not a single dramatic hour. The relationship is built across dozens of smaller episodes, each one adding a layer to the portrait, and the portrait that emerges is the most sustained and precise illustration in the show's history of what Freud described when he wrote about the transmission of psychic damage from parent to child. Not the transmission of specific memories or specific events, but the transmission of patterns. The shape of how to be in the world, the shape of what love looks like and what it costs and what it demands in return. Season 5, Episode 2, Cape Fear, aired October 7, 1993. John Vitti wrote it. Rich Moore directed it. The episode is primarily a parody of the 1991 film Cape Fear, and is famous for the extended sequence on the houseboat where Sideshow Bob keeps stepping on rakes. The Wikipedia article on the episode confirms it as one of the most beloved in the show's history, and documents the rake sequence as one of the most frequently discussed pieces of physical comedy in American animated television. But inside the Cape Fear plot, inside the witness protection scheme and the houseboat and the rakes, there is a moment that is easy to miss and that the show does not frame as important. Bart wakes up in the middle of the night terrified. He has been receiving death threats from Sideshow Bob, who has been sending letters to the house, and the fear has gotten into his sleep. He walks to Homer and Marge's bedroom and wakes Homer up. He tells Homer he is scared. Homer's first response, half asleep, is to strangle Bart. The hands go to the throat automatically, before Homer is fully conscious. The strangulation reflex is so deeply embedded that it fires before waking. It is the first thing Homer's body does when Bart disturbs his sleep, before his mind has time to identify who is there, or what is happening, or what the appropriate response might be. Then Homer wakes up fully. He sees Bart standing there, frightened. He pulls his son into bed with him and Marge, and holds him. The tenderness of that second response, the actual waking Homer, the one who loves his son, is real, and the show plays it straight. But the first response was also Homer, the hands on the throat before the eyes were open. That is the pattern that lives below the level of intention, the one Abe installed, and that Homer carries without being able to always access it before it has already happened. The Season 1 episode Bart the Genius, the second episode of the series, aired January 14, 1990, written by John Vitti and directed by James Burrows, establishes the baseline of the Homer-Bart dynamic before the show had fully found its footing. Homer and Bart play Scrabble as a family, and Homer challenges Bart's word. The argument escalates. Homer chases Bart through the house. The dynamic is established immediately and entirely. Homer and Bart in conflict. Homer's frustration finding physical expression. Bart running. The show would spend 30-plus seasons building on this foundation. What the show builds is complicated in ways that the simple shorthand, Homer strangles Bart, Bart misbehaves, cycle repeats, does not fully capture. The Homer-Bart relationship is not only damage. The show is consistent and documented in its depiction of genuine affection running alongside the damage, and the affection is not a corrective to the damage or a proof that the damage does not matter. Both are true at the same time. This is the thing the show understands about the transmission of psychic damage that makes it more honest than most family comedies. It does not argue that love cancels harm. Season 5, Episode 7, Bart's Inner Child, aired November 11, 1993. George Meyer wrote it. Bob Anderson directed it. The episode is primarily about Homer buying a trampoline and Springfield embracing a self-help guru named Brad Goodman, who holds Bart up as a model of uninhibited self-expression. Wikipedia article confirms the episode aired in Season 5. What is relevant here is a scene that the episode uses as comedy, but that carries something real. Brad Goodman tells the assembled citizens of Springfield to do what Bart does, to act on impulse, to say what they feel, to stop filtering their desires through what other people expect of them. Springfield does this. The results are catastrophic. The town falls apart almost immediately because a community of people all operating on pure impulse and zero self-regulation cannot function. The joke is obvious and it lands. But the show is also making a point about Bart specifically, that what Brad Goodman holds up as admirable is a survival strategy, not a philosophy. Bart does not live in the present moment because he has achieved some kind of enlightened freedom from anxiety. He lives in the present moment because the damage he carries makes the future too threatening to plan for and the past too painful to sit with. This reading is supported by the Season 2 episode Bart Gets an F. The first episode of Season 2 aired October 11, 1990, written by David M. Stern and directed by David Silverman. The Wikipedia article on the episode confirms it as the highest-rated episode in the show's history at the time of its broadcast. The plot is straightforward. Bart is failing his history class and faces being held back a year. He makes a genuine effort to study. He fails the exam anyway, missing a passing grade by 1 point. Bart sits at his desk after getting his grade back and cries. The show does not cut away. It holds the image. Bart Simpson, the character the show has spent a season and a half establishing as anarchic and unbothered and fundamentally resistant to consequence, sits at his desk and cries because he tried, genuinely tried, and it was not enough. Mrs. Krabappel gives him 1 extra point when he demonstrates knowledge of colonial history in an offhand remark during his crying, and he passes. But the extra point is almost beside the point by then. What the episode has done is show the audience what is underneath the chaos. A boy who is not indifferent to success and failure, who cares deeply about both, and who has been using the chaos as cover for the caring, because caring and failing is more painful than not caring and failing. The defense mechanism at work in Bart's classroom behavior and social persona is one Freud identified clearly. The child who has been told, explicitly or implicitly, that they are not wanted or not capable, and who has absorbed this judgment deeply enough that they anticipate failure, will sometimes construct a persona built around not trying. The not trying is protection. If you do not try, the failure is not evidence of inadequacy. It is just the predictable result of not trying. The moment you try and still fail, the inadequacy becomes harder to argue with. Homer told Bart he was not wanted. The show documents this across multiple episodes. The Grandpa versus Sexual Inadequacy episode has Marge confirming to Homer that he says this to Bart all the time, and Homer's defense is that it is cute when he does it. The word accident, which Abe used on Homer in the car, has a direct equivalent in what Homer communicates to Bart. Not always in those exact words, but in the cumulative weight of the strangulations and the dismissals, and the moments when Homer's frustration with Bart is louder than his love for him. Bart built the class clown, the rebel, the uncontrollable student, the chronic underachiever, as a structure to live inside where none of that damage can reach him in the specific way it would reach him if he dropped the structure and just tried to be a regular kid who wanted things and worked for them. The structure is expensive. It costs him academically, socially, and in ways the show documents across seasons. But the alternative? Dropping the armor in a household where Homer's hands go to his throat automatically before the man is even awake feels more dangerous. Season 4, Episode 2, A Streetcar Named Marge, aired October 1st, 1992. Jeff Martin wrote it, Mark Kirkland directed it. The episode is primarily about Marge performing in a local production of A Streetcar Named Desire. The subplot involves Maggie at a daycare called the Ayn Rand School for Tots, run by a woman named Brandine, who confiscates all the baby's pacifiers on the principle that self-reliance must be learned immediately. The babies organize and retrieve their pacifiers in a sequence that parodies The Great Escape. This episode is not about Bart, but it contains a piece of environmental evidence about the Simpson household that matters for understanding what Bart grows up inside. The household Marge performs in, the one where Homer watches television and does not initially attend her show, and eventually does attend and is moved by the performance, is the household Bart navigates daily. Homer's obliviousness and Marge's suppressed life, and the ambient noise of all the unaddressed needs in the house are Bart's background conditions. The School for Tots and the pacifier recovery operation are a parody of something real, environments that strip children of comfort in the name of toughening them up, and children who find ways to reclaim what they need anyway. Bart reclaims what he needs through the persona. The chaos is the pacifier. It is the thing he is not supposed to have that the household's ambient damage keeps trying to take from him, and that he keeps recovering through increasingly elaborate means. The Season 7 episode Bart Sells His Soul, Episode 4 of Season 7, aired October 8, 1995, written by Greg Daniels and directed by Wesley Archer, is the episode that makes all of this most visible. The plot involves Bart selling his soul to Milhouse for $5, then spending the episode discovering that the sale has had real consequences. Animals do not respond to him. Automatic doors do not open for him. He cannot laugh at things that are genuinely funny. The world treats him as slightly less present than it treated him before. What the episode establishes, and what the Wikipedia article on the episode and the critical writing around it have consistently noted, is that Bart has a soul. This sounds obvious, but the show had spent 6 seasons using Bart's chaos and his apparent indifference to consequence to create the impression of a character who operates outside the normal emotional economy. Bart Sells His Soul is the episode that proves the impression wrong. Bart has an interior. He has needs that are not jokes. He has a relationship to the metaphysical concept of his own soul, his own inner life, that he has been protecting under the chaos for 6 seasons. The episode ends with Lisa buying Bart's soul back for him, using money she had been saving. She gives it to him without a lecture. She just gives it back. And Bart, who called Homer a baboon's equivalent in his own idiom across many previous episodes, who has been strangled and dismissed and told he was not wanted, holds the piece of paper that represents his returned soul and cries for the second time in the show's documented history. The Freudian structure of Bart's character, built from the evidence the show provides across these episodes, is a precise mirror of Homer's structure with 1 generation of additional damage compounded. Homer received the absent mother and the damaging father and built an id-dominant personality that operates primarily on the pleasure principle with limited superego development. Bart received Homer, which is to say he received the id-dominant personality as his primary model of fatherhood, complete with the strangulation and the dismissals and the "I didn't want you" jokes, without the Abe equivalent of Homer's own father to explain where the damage came from. Homer at least had Mona, briefly, in memory, in the stargazing image, in the note she left in the care packages that never arrived. Bart has Homer's version of that, which is the genuine love that surfaces between the strangulations, the moments where Homer and Bart connect over something inadvisable, and the connection is real. The love is present, the damage is also present. The show does not resolve the tension between them, because the tension is not resolvable. It is the condition Bart lives inside. What Bart builds from these conditions is the most psychologically coherent character arc in the show's history when read through the Freudian lens this essay has been applying. The chaos is protection. The persona is armor. The "I don't care" is the loudest possible expression of someone who cares enormously, but has learned, through specific and documented experience, that caring loudly in this household is more dangerous than not caring at all. Abe told Homer he was an accident. Homer tells Bart he was not wanted. Bart tells the world he does not need anything from it. The chain runs clean and straight from section 1 all the way to Bart sitting at his desk crying over a test grade. And the chain is not metaphor. It is episodic, documented, canon, verified in production commentary and critical analysis and the show's own internal continuity. Season 28, Episode 3, A Father's Watch, aired October 9th, 2016. The episode is confirmed in the show's episode records as establishing that the chain of Simpson father-son damage goes back further than Abe. The damage does not originate with Mona's departure or Abe's car argument cruelty. Those events are themselves the products of formations that predate them. Fathers who damaged sons who became fathers who damaged sons. The pattern running back through the family's history further than any episode has shown. Homer is a link in the chain, not the first link. Bart is the next link, not the last. The show never argues that the chain cannot be broken. It never tells the audience that Bart is doomed, that the strangulations will inevitably become Bart strangling his own children, that the "you were not wanted" will pass unchanged to the next generation. What it shows instead is the conditions under which the chain continues. Obliviousness, underdeveloped tools, love that is real but not the right shape, and the conditions under which it bends, even slightly. Bart sells his soul, shows the bending. The soul returned. Lisa gives it back. Something in Bart that the chaos was supposed to protect remains protectable. Homer, having transmitted the chain to Bart with the same unconsciousness that Abe transmitted it to him, carries his own version of the damage forward in a direction the show had been documenting since its earliest seasons without ever fully naming it. The specific, quiet, daily self-destruction of a man who eats and drinks and sleeps and avoids in the precise amounts required to not feel the full weight of everything the first 2 sections of this essay established. The death drive in section 7, the oral fixation in section 1, the blunted superego in every section, all of it running simultaneously, all of it rooted in the same place, all of it producing the same basic outcome, a man moving through a life that loves him back without fully reaching him. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What the show had not yet been asked to do, across all of these sections, was produce the single episode that brings every thread together, the mother wound and the father wound, and the id and the repetition and the self-destruction and the inadequate fathering and the chain, in one contained 30-minute argument. That episode exists. It is not the one most people name when they talk about the best of the show, but it is the one where Freud's complete portrait of Homer Simpson becomes undeniable, delivered through a premise so simple it looks like throwaway comedy, until you understand what it is actually doing. Section 10, the episode that says everything. Season 19, episode 19 of The Simpsons aired May 11th, 2008. Joel H. Cohen wrote it. It was produced under the production code KABF12. Glenn Close returned for the final time as Mona Simpson, her last appearance in the show's run, confirmed across multiple documented sources, including the Simpsons Wiki and the Grokopedia analysis of the episode. The episode is called Mona Leavesa. Most people who talk about Homer and his mother talk about Mother Simpson. That is the episode that gets cited, the one that earns the ranking in best of lists, the one with the stargazing image that the show's own wiki describes as one of the saddest scenes in its entire history. Mother Simpson is the reveal. Mona Leavesa is the reckoning. And it is a harder watch precisely because the reckoning is not cinematic. There is no Glenn Close voice-guided stargazing. There is no swelling music under a poetic image of abandonment. There is just Homer in his living room, refusing to let his dying mother into the room where he keeps his feelings. Mona arrives unannounced. The family comes home to find the house apparently burglarized. They discover it is Mona, hiding inside, having evaded authorities. She tells them she is done running. She wants to stay. She wants to be present for whatever time is left. She bakes pies. She shares stories. She tries, in every small domestic way available to her, to occupy the space in Homer's life that her disappearance created. Homer will not let her. He does not shout her out of the house. He does not make a speech about what she cost him. He pouts. He gives her the cold shoulder. He rejects every attempt at closeness with the specific, controlled cruelty of someone who has decided that the safest response to the person who left is to leave first, emotionally, before they can do it again. Every pie she bakes sits on the counter as evidence of a gesture Homer refuses to receive. Every story she tells lands in a room where he has already removed himself. The Grokopedia analysis of the episode confirms the psychological structure of Homer's behavior. His arc moves from entrenched resentment to guilt-driven action, and the resentment is not performed. It is the direct and documented product of repeated parental abandonment. Homer is not punishing Mona strategically. He is protecting himself in the only way his formation has given him, by not letting the person who hurt him get close enough to hurt him again. This is the repetition compulsion completing its circuit. Section 2 established how Abe's damage became Homer's behavior with Bart. The strangulation, the "you were not wanted," the pattern running from one generation to the next, without the person doing it fully understanding that it is a pattern. Mona Leavesa shows the same mechanism operating in the other direction. Mona left Homer as a child, and Homer absorbed that leaving as his most foundational experience of what the people who are supposed to love you actually do. So when she returns, he leaves her before she can leave him. He recreates the abandonment with himself in the active role, because the active role, at least, is one he can control. He prepares an apology. The Simpsons Wiki and Grokopedia both document this. Homer softens overnight, feels guilt about his coldness, and begins making a card for Mona. He goes to give it to her and finds her dead beside the fireplace. She died while he was preparing the words he could not say while she was alive. The timing is not cruel for the sake of cruelty. The timing is honest. The thing Homer needed to say to Mona, the acknowledgement of the whole, the grief, the food and the beer, and all the ways he has been filling the space her absence left, was always going to be too late. Not because she died before he could say it, but because the formation that made it impossible to say while she was alive is the same formation that her leaving created. The wound produced the silence. The silence lasted until the wound could not be addressed anymore. He confronts her during the episode directly. The Simpsons Wiki documents this exchange, telling her she left a hole in his heart that he filled with food. This is the episode where Homer names the oral fixation that Section 1 built. He does not use Freud's language. He uses his own, which is more accurate for being less formal, a hole, food. The direct line from one to the other, stated plainly by the man who has been living it since childhood. Then she is gone. And Homer, who spent the episode refusing to let her in, spends the rest of it honoring her final wish, dispersing her ashes in a way connected to her lifelong activism against Mr. Burns. The family uses the gifts Mona left each of them in her DVD will to help Homer complete the mission. Bart uses a Swiss Army knife she left him. Marge burns a hemp handbag. Lisa uses earrings. The children and Marge, serving the dead woman Homer pushed away, become the vehicle through which Homer finally does something for her. Every thread this essay has followed arrives in this episode and does not resolve. The mother wound does not heal. It closes one chapter and leaves the scar. The repetition does not break. Homer repeated the abandonment pattern right up until the moment repetition was no longer an option. The id does not develop new tools. Homer still cannot say the thing directly, cannot let the person in while letting the person in is still possible. The chain does not end. Bart and Lisa watch their father push their grandmother away and then scramble to help him honor her, and they are learning something from both halves of that experience. What Mona Leavesa contains that no other episode contains is all of it simultaneously. The oral fixation named by Homer himself, the repetition compulsion playing out in real time, the id's complete inability to access the emotional. Register the moment requires until the moment is gone. The chain visible in the children who grew up watching it and who moved to help anyway because they love their father and understand, in the way children of damaged parents often understand, that loving him means working around the places where he cannot reach. The episode does not land with the weight of Mother Simpson because it does not try to. It is quieter and more uncomfortable and more honest about what the years between the two episodes actually produced. Mother Simpson showed the wound. Mona Leavesa shows what the wound looked like after 13 years of being carried without treatment. Homer stands at the end, having done right by his mother after having failed her while she was alive, which is not redemption, but is the closest the formation allows. The pie is still on the counter. The apology card was never delivered. The hole is still there. The question all 9 sections and this one have been circling: whether Homer Simpson knows what he is carrying, whether any part of him sees the shape of the damage and understands where it came from, finds its most direct answer not in any single line of dialogue, but in that card he started making. He knew. He saw enough. He just could not get there in time. What that failure cost the people around him, and what it cost Homer himself, quietly, daily, in ways the food and the beer and the noise could only partially manage, is the question the final section is built to answer. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.